What's up, everybody? Lone wide receiver from DFSArmy.com here to go over this Rocket League slate with you guys. Kind of explain Rocket League DFS a little bit more from our first podcast a few months ago, and give you an insight on my process, how I'm building lineups, and what I'm looking to do on a daily basis. So the first thing I like to do is I like to look at the DFS Army Rocket League stat sheet under the esports column on the website. First thing I like to do really is I like to look at the team column before I go into players because I want to identify what I think these teams are going to do. A good thing to start looking at first is shots against per game because shots against leaves for saves for. As we could tell, as they have 9.39 shots against per game, which is the most against on the slate, and they also have 5.29 saves for, which is the second most on the slate. The team with the second most shots against also has the second most saves for. So as you can see, there's some correlation there. And the nice thing about, or the not nice thing, however you want to look at it, is saves are worth half of a goal on Rocket League DFS. So for every 2 saves you get, it's equal to 1 goal in terms of points. And as we can see, this team, Solary, they average 5.03 saves for per game, but they only average 1.74 goals per game. So that means, if you even doubled the goals for from Solary, which would make it 3.5, that's still not even 4 goals per game, which is, they have 5 saves per game. So saves are a big part of fantasy production here and something that you cannot ignore. And also the nice thing about saves is monkeys will probably be a little bit lower owned because they're not expected to win and they won't have as much goal upside, but also, that being said, they have a lot of save upside, and if they could squeak away with a few games, they could win 2-1, but also they could have 5 saves for in that game too as well, which is really good for them. Another big thing to look at, obviously, is just goals for per game, being able to tell who's going to score a lot or who's not. Um, and then score for per game, that's a good one. That means these players get a lot of saves, goals, and these teams kind of don't allow as much and don't score as much, so they're more efficient teams. But that's how I try to look at that. Let's try to get into the players now. With the players, what we do here is we take team score, team goals, team saves, team shots, and all that, and we add it up and we give it a value, and that gives it the V offense, which is basically just how much they're involved on the field. So normally, guys up top, normally, always, these should be the good guys, the guys you're targeting to play, the dudes who you want to build your lineups around, and these are the guys, in the red who you're not really looking to roster. The 2 biggest things I like to look for here, if I'm looking to go outside of this and try to target something specific, is team goals and saves. Those are the 2 biggest ways to accumulate fantasy points in Rocket League DFS, and that's what you want your guys to be doing. So guys like Relating Wave, Archie, and Exotic, who score 50% of their team's goals, those are good players to try to target because they score a lot, and that's what you need. You need points, obviously. But that's why we look at teams first, because you see, oh, well, Exotic does a lot here, but he scores 51% of the team goals, which, when you're winning is normally when you reach that percentage, not so much when you're losing. And if you're losing, you get more saves. And we think here, well, I think that Endpoint's going to beat Solary. As you see, Solary does not have good offensive numbers. Their defense is very meh, and Endpoint, they're not the worst on offense, and they don't allow a lot of shots, or they don't take a lot of shots per game, so that's not good for Solary's save upside. So that's how, you're like, ooh, even though Exotic's high up here, I don't really know if I want a huge piece of that or not. Another thing you really have to consider here is the fact that these guys are probably going to be chalk. That is what other sites optimizers, other sites data sheets, it's the same data out there that we're all getting that DraftKings uses to make the prices for the slate. And as you can see here, it's kind of correlated to the V offense. Like, look at all these guys. All the red players who have high salaries are all at the top of this V offense list, and that's because this is kind of what DraftKings looks at when they're making their pricing for the slates. So that's what I look for here. Let's try to get into building a lineup. So obviously, pricing's it can be loose at times. This is one of the slates where it's tight, so you can't just go add the top 2 guys and then or even shoot, even this, you can't even do that. So, that means you have to get unique here. And a lot of people, they're going to look at these type of data sheets, and fairly so, they're going to play guys high up here, which is what you should do. It's optimal, and it's going to work out and win you money in the long run. But another thing you have to consider here is that this is not what happens every game. Like, while they do score 51% of the team's goals on average, that does not mean they're going to do that every game. So it's nice to look at guys down here whose teams have good upside and they score some of their team's goals, and they're probably going to be lower owned and help you open up salary, as you see, because you can't just load Archie and Talks in the captain spot because you're not going to have nearly enough salary left over. So guys, like specifically on this slate, I like Virtuoso. I thought he looked really good in the qualifiers. He's 33% of the team shots. He has 32% of their goals. I don't really expect them to be back that much, so I'm not too concerned about him not having a huge percent of his team saves. But let's try to build a line with him. He should be unique too as well. He's down there. So if you start with one of these mid-price guys and put him in your captain, then you could go for a stud like, let's say, like the best one to slate, we'll say Archie. And now you have Virtuoso there, and you could be like, okay, I like Archie, I like top lokes, I think they're going to beat Similarity, and stacking's really important in this. You're not just going to find the winner with a 1v1v1v1 stack every time. It could get you there, but it's going to be really hard. You have to completely nail it. So a good way to do that is team stacks. I do not recommend 3. 3, it's really hard for that to be the optimal, especially on a 3-game slate. I wouldn't even consider it on a 2-game slate, maybe, but minimal amount of my lineups would be like that. It's not optimal. It's really weird, and you're going to need like your team to dominate and get a huge GLA and no one else to do anything, which is hard. But as you see here, let's get back to the lineup. So we took a value guy, and we took one of the chalk guys, Archie, on the chalk good guys, and got him in our lineup. So now we have 9,800 left. So we go down here, and Casio, he is the second best player for here from top blokes. Gets 32% of the team's shot or score. Only 23% of their goals. This team does not have a lot of games together, and the data from the qualifiers today weren't able to be included as that data is not available yet. But I watched those games, and he was definitely the number 2 man here, which is, what we're here for. Is I try to help you guys get the edge. I watch all these games. But he gets a good percent of the saves, and he takes 32% of the shots. So Archie can't do everything. You're thinking like, okay, Archie's really involved up the field, but someone has to be getting his assists, and someone has to be scoring the goals for him, like if he's going to get the assists. And I think that player is going to be Casio. So now we have a 2-1 stack so far, and look, now we have enough money to get everyone but the top guy. So we could go ahead and get a guy like Tho here. So you get a nice game stack. You like Archie and Casio, and then you got Tho in there who should get a big percent of their saves, and that's a good way to build lineups. But that's really all I'm going to do here, because the rest of this would just be me building other lineups for you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Feel free to reach out at me at low-owned-wide-receiver on Twitter. I'm around all the time to answer questions and all that stuff. Hit me up in the Slack chat, and I'll see you guys around.